A very good morning to every one of us. We are today in the day 2 continuation of the Conference of Directors of Land in the federal and state MDAs. We have had some paper presentation yesterday, about 6 papers presentation. Today we are going to have another 6 papers or 7 so. But before then, to kickstart today, I want to invite Director of Lands and Housing in the Ministry, SS Sebeyo Collins Alabi, to give us an overview of the conference commencing today. Director. Let me quickly invite the first set of our resource person to be on the highest table here. First of all, my pleasure to invite Professor Kemiki Olorotimi, Dean of Environmental Sciences, Federal University of Technology, Mina. A round of applause for the Prof. Our next resource person is Professor Modupe Omiri, Dean of Environmental Sciences, University of Lagos. You are welcome to the high table, ma. Next to be on the high table is Dr. Fitka Bilishaka, Nasarawa State University, KP. Please join them on the high table. These are our 3 eminent resource persons in the morning session before the tea break. You are all welcome. I now hand over the mic to the director, Mr. Collins Alabi.
I would like to say good morning to every one of us. In no particular order, we recognize your presence. Our executive registrar of Esvabon, you are recognized. Our professor, as always, Professor Duguer, we welcome you. Our team from the World Bank, as always, we appreciate your presence here. Our professor from Niger State, Professor Nuhu. Sorry, sir. Remind me of that your title, sir. Shetima.
Shetima.
Yes, Shetima. I'll respect the authority in Niger State, please. Our babas and mamas from the PTCLR. You're all wonderful. You're all wonderful. Since Sunday, you have been around. It's a good one. Thank you very much. And our delegates, the directors of lands in states, you were here till about almost 10 yesterday in the night. We appreciate all of you for your time well spent in Abuja and for your wonderful contributions. It will go in the annals of our records. So we're all welcome. I won't forget to recognize our speakers for today. The Dean of Environmental Science, Federal University of Technology, Professor Kemiki Olorotimi. We recognize you, sir. I didn't call her professor, I call her mama. Because she's Professor Emeritus. Yes. Dean of Environmental Science, University of Lagos, Professor Modupe Omiri. I recognize our Baba from Nasarawa State University, Kefi, as always, Dr. Fitka Bishaka. And I recognize every one of us from the Secretariat to land officers to the media and everybody. I think we deserve an applause for one another. I will briefly just go into the message that brought me to the podium. Conference overview. We highlight the theme of the conference for this year as being equity land stewardship, challenges of land administration and its impact on climate change and community rights. Permit me to digress that this is a world global theme that came out from our land conference in Washington in May. The whole world is around this theme, trying to have a standardized land administration processes. So we as a nation, we are connected to that as well too. So that's where we coined our team from, because we were part of them. First and foremost, I combined the address by the Permanent Secretary and that of the Honorable Minister who delivered the keynote address. There is no gainsaying the fact that the issue of ratification of the Harmonized Trade for 2004 has been settled. Do I have your affirmation?
Yes, sir.
I'm talking to my directors of lands. Do I have your affirmation? Yes. Are we good to go to the council on that? Thank you very much. If you look at the speech of the minister towards the end, he made certain declaration that is in the social media now. The issue of ground rent accrued by beneficiaries of federal government land holdings, and has given a deadline that all of this should be resolved. Yesterday, the Permanent Secretary, before he came in, told me that he was in Lagos the other day, precisely on Tuesday. He was locked out in one of our site and services estates, precisely Banana Island, for 30 minutes. He now said, I am the landlord. Why are you locking me out here? This is what we have all across the country, even Gwarimpa. Our officers here, we are trying to get ground rent from them sometime last year. It became an issue, assessing them. Many of them don't come to pay their ground rent except you force them. And if they are coming, meaning that they have assigned their properties or they have gone to a bank to secure loan, it's not acceptable. These were the declaration of the minister yesterday that was spread across. And the need to look at land administration properly in tandem with global best practices. That we are all doing all together. Issues of illegal possession of federal government landed properties by individuals, states, communities. He mentioned that in his speech. And I remember last night, our delegates from Ondo State brought up an issue that I'm far more aware because I was in Akure some months back. The king of Akure gave a land to the federal government. In the same state, he gave a land to the state government. But The boundaries of this land were not established because they were thick forest. So there was no contest as far back as 1975-76 at the creation of the old Ondo State. Only now that the federal government established their presence in the land given, no survey. We built federal secretariat there. All other federal establishments were there, bringing development to the area. Then problem came. Show us your title as a federal government. It became an issue to us. We had to go into the matter. We had a meeting with the Oba. He said his ancestors told him, at the time we were looking for land for programs for the federal government, that they took them to that thick forest. You, federal government, continue to use this place. You, state government, continue to use this place. No document, no paper. This happened in 1979, 1980. Today now, we're having challenges in Akure. We gave PPP developer to develop some portion. No boundary, nothing, no survey. We went to the state government. We met with the permanent secretary. We didn't see the commissioner. But that's not the issue. The issue is there were issues there, but which we as land officers should use our expertise to solve this problem without bias. This I assure them we are going to do. As we speak, in Imo now, we are in crisis on land matter. Many across the country. We won't use fire for fire to solve this problem, but we will use land administration competencies in resolving all of this. So these were the highlights around the minister's declaration of yesterday. And I think the press got it right. So if you're among them that have been owing government ground rent, I urge you, before the power measure come onto you, please go and pay ground rent. We are looking for money to run the government. In excess of trillions of naira that decide that went and reclaimed land across the country. Waterways, sorry, without approval. We are on them, we are pursuing them. So these were the highlights of the presentation before the breakout session. And I'd like to express the summary of some of the presentations. First, the lead paper from Professor Ogbonna, which is Equitable Land Stewardship, Challenges of Land Administration, and its impact on climate change and community rights. It talks about the core functions of government for the common benefits of Nigerians. In order that land as a property, and as we practitioners, we should all be involved and be transparent in land having noted as a property. He spoke about land rights associated or connected with environmental challenges. He didn't forget by noting conflicts arising from land, which some of them we've just discussed them. He talks about ownership challenges as well too, and stewardship on land, the impact of land on climate, and resiliences. He talked about equality and equity versus equity. He didn't forget to talk about community rights. Above all, he advocated for basic understanding of land, stewardship, equity, community rights in the face of climate change. Paper 2 by Professor Titi Dugeri talks about transparency and accountability in land governance, a must for adaptation to climate change and community rights in Africa. In his presentation, he considered land as a basic resource. He looked at imperative for efficient land management systems. He didn't forget not talking about governance issues in land administration in Africa. He as well advocated for transparency, for equity and accountability as it demands in the modern economy. He appreciated the fact that climate change and community rights cannot be ignored. And that is a fact that should form the bulk of our communique. Because these are practical things happening to every sphere of Nigeria. Is that our own conflict there, environmental degradation, and they also afford us. You know them. You are deeply involved at state level, and the challenges you are faced with as land administrators. I go into paper 3, as presented by Mrs. Ofikat Odetoro, Director of Environmental Assessment Department in the Ministry of Environment, which is economic analysis of sustainable land use practice for climate change mitigation. She has been involved in environmental issues in the last 30 years. I'm quite sure I can say for free that she is a consultant to the World Bank. And she had made useful contribution, even on her behalf, in some of our projects with the World Bank, precisely Sustainable Procurement, Environment and Social Enhancements Program of the World Bank. And she has defended the cause of land administration in Nigeria, while yet we were present there. And she appreciated and recommended that we should have a sustainable land management system, SLM. She defined climate change. She told us here that we can admonish different definitions. And she recommended that we should use the sustainable land management to mitigate climate change. What a wonderful presentation. And she further advised and recommended the application of this SLM in revenue generation. And she thereby called for action. And the action starts what? Now. I share with us, in one way or the other, that the lead World Bank land admin expert told us, get revenue from land and building, get trained, get infrastructure. There's money in land. There's money in building. How do we go about it? These are the forum for which we do our exchange programs. I discussed already the one that I asked a question yesterday in my recapping for Estate Surveyor and Valuer Olawale Ojikutu yesterday in his presentation about community rights and land governance. And a lot of questions were asked, and she emphasized the challenges they faced at the corridor of Lagos-Calabar Expressway acquisition. We won't go into that because I belong to the federal government. I must support what the president, the government is doing. But then it didn't mean that we didn't tell them the truth. We did. When we saw all of these things happening, there's a process, environmental and social framework. We were involved in it for the past 15 years with the World Bank. They came up with a big document, globally tested, and we are applying it. Part of which is why we are here as well too. They are here, they can confirm what I'm saying. I told us yesterday, challenges abound as we speak. Undervaluation of property that is worth 200 million for 40 million. Communities are crying. I can tell you now that the alignment now has again been adjusted. I was told some days ago here by experts that came from Lagos. He talks about being disciplined and being transparent, as I was said by previous speakers. We should, as land officers, be transparent, enforce due process. I told my people in the office, nobody can frustrate me in government. I can use my hand to resign and go away. Nothing. I didn't bring anything. I didn't leave anything. No matter what. It's not my father's job. It's not my mother's job. It's government job. I'm there to work. If the hospital is not convenient for me to do it, I resign and go away. But nobody will frustrate me. And I always cry. And I told them in joke, say, I be a kitty man or I be a petition. Part of my. So these are the highlights of our presentation yesterday. We looked at what Professor Al-Amin said about the ministerial tax team. I frowned because we have eminent men and women here from the PTCLR who for over 12, 13, 14, 15 years had worked on this document. They had 11 regulations. They were able to affirm 4. We took those documents to the World Bank in Washington, D.C. Some members of the ministerial tax team saw it in my hand that I should give them. I said, nah, I won't give you. But you can see, and one of them was snapping in my hand. I was shaking my head. But the truth of the matter is the fact that we won't allow the labors of our heroes past to be in vain. I interacted with a lot of them. I saw the enthusiasm they have. I took the mandate of the minister to speak to all of them and the chairman, even to the presidency, and I got the affirmation. They've gotten it right. All this is we are doing is in their book. It's because it has all been exposed to Nigerians. That's why we are dragging. I think they deserve applause, please. The mandate I have on that is to reconcile the two committees together and move forward. All they needed is the political will to transform all they have done. You as politicians here, let us support them so that the work they have done can be acceptable and presented before all of us as Nigerians. What the tax team at Mr. level were doing, they can't get it done the way they are doing it. They needed fund, and the fund is domiciled in my department. I had meetings with them. That's why we invited one of their members, Professor Alami. We won't duplicate function or assignment, but we reconcile and move forward. So that's what we're doing. The other last topic yesterday, paper presented by ex-Vermont chairman, entrenching equitable land administration in Nigeria, a smart agenda for a program shift in compulsory land acquisition and compensation. I believe we have dwelled too much on that, and we have looked at creating regulations, more especially for sections 28 and 29 of the Land Use Act. If you can do that for National Housing Policy, National Urban Development Policy in 2012, and they have revised their own now, awaiting validation. If there are challenges associated and inherent in the Land Use Act, there are certain provisions that we can create regulations from it that we can do, and that we are going to do. At the end of it all we desire from all the presentation is cohesion, collaboration, development, build capacity, enhance yourself and your community. That is why we are here. On this note, if there's other things that have not been able to bring to our attention, we should be able to do so. I rest my case. Thank you very much, my son.
Thank you, Director Lance. Our distinguished participants, we have 3 papers to take before tea breaks, and just to have an advantage of time, we'll take the 3, then we'll now go for the question and now just go for tea break. And any member from now, we're expecting our Permanent Secretary, Dr. Marco Ogunjobi, to join us. So the first paper today is titled Methodologies in the Review of Crops and Economic Trees, Rates on Agricultural Land, a tool to mitigate against an adequate compensation and its effect on climate change. And that paper will be given by Professor Kemiki Olorotimi, Dean of Environmental Sciences, Federal University of Technology, Minna. A round of applause for the professor. Professor, sir, 30 minutes presentation, sir.
A very good morning to us all. And I want to believe that we are all enjoying the city of Abuja since we came to Abuja. Distinguished, I don't know how to start the protocol. Director of Lands, good morning, sir. Director, Information and Services, good morning, sir. Media Director, and distinguished professor, especially Professor Mudupe Omiri, who is also a grandmother of estate survey and valuation in Nigeria. My surveyor, good morning, sir. Distinguished professors present, I can see Professor Dugeri, Shetima of Minna, Professor M.B. Nuru, past Director of Lands, State Directors, Federal Minister of Housing and Urban Development, and our World Bank friends who have always been passionate and to see that we do the right thing. Mr. Elijah, Mr. Tosin, good morning. To my friends, thank you very much. And to the multimedia, good morning. Yesterday we had a party here. I enjoyed myself. I was moving from table to table and picking snack, and I ate meat pie. No. What do you call that? A prank? I enjoyed it. I also enjoyed, there was something chicken pie. I enjoyed that. Then there was also granite. I enjoyed myself. I also played game yesterday to the extent that I forgot I have a presentation. So don't mind me. I will only share a small slide with you because I just slept off. After that dinner, I was induced. I didn't take alcoholic wine, but the environment, I was so relaxed. I felt I forgot all my problems, and I just went to bed. So I'm going to just share a few slides. Also, as a professor, you don't repeat. You don't get your audience bored. Justice has been done to the team yesterday. We that are coming behind today just to just touch one or two areas as an addition. The big guys have done justice to that yesterday. First slide. Okay, what about the topic, the opening slide? Has that been projected? Okay. So we are looking at the methodologies in the review of crops and econometry rate on agricultural land, a tool to mitigate against an inadequate compensation and its effect on climate change. Next slide. Thank you. There are two ways in life. There is what you call the right way and the wrong way. If you go the right way, you get to the right destination. If you get to the wrong way, you will land in the wrong place. If you've been to the airport, you will see two airlines, same airline, loadings concurrently, simultaneously at the same time. So it's going to Uyo, this one is going to Lagos. If care is not taken, you are going to Lagos, you don't ask questions, you will board out of Uyo. And if you are the type that you will be pressing your phone when the aircraft announcement is going on, you just hear, we are now descending into Akpabio airport, Uyo. You will, wow, I'm not supposed to be here, you will be here. Because you move in a wrong direction. But if you move in the right direction, you are definitely bound to arrive at the right destination. That is why when you are boarding the aircraft, the staff will come to check your ticket. They will check, okay, or sure, okay, Lagos, yes, Lagos, yes. But if you don't allow them to check you, you can find yourself in another destination. And when you use a wrong approach, you are going to get a wrong result. Next slide. Okay, this is a typical marking guide, for a question. And the question is over 20. As teacher, we set question, we set marking guide. This question is over 20. You can score between 1 and 5 if your ideas are confusing, illogical, and totally not relevant to the topic. You can score between 6 and 10 when your ideas are somewhat unclear and at times confusing. But if your ideas are generally clear, logical, and appropriate to the topic, you can score between 11 and 14. You can hit 18 to 20 if your approach is good, clear, and logical. So anytime we have the right perspective, right approach, right methodology, then we are almost certain that we are going to get it right. Next slide. The 2008 rate that was developed about 16 years ago, we must applaud the team that worked on that document. Fantastic. They did a very good job. They did a very good job. They put in their best, and that effort must be commended. If they have not done that, we will not be talking about a review. You can't review something except something has been done. So they're laying that foundation. We must constantly appreciate their sacrifice. However, as we speak today, that 2008 rate has become obsolete, and we have agreed for the review. We have ratified the review. But while the 2008 was being used, a kind of inadequacy, you know, the template has some level of deficiency, and also it has become obsolete and is giving people worry. You can see that young man say, is this the kind of money I'm getting? Wow, this is my big house. See the other one with his laptop, worried. If you look at another picture with the funnel, you can see the note and the coin. Is the coin that is coming out for that project affected person. And when the methodology is not right, it creates chaos. It creates agitation. And the government of President Tinubu, as much as possible, is a peace-loving government. And effort must be made to ensure that our methodology, because when we have the hearing methodology, you'll be thinking about a book. Even you yourself, you are a methodology. Because if we give you a methodology and you misinterpret the methodology, or you decide to put it aside for your personal interest, then you are causing chaos, you are causing confusion. So whenever the methodology is wrong, people will protest. There will be agitation. There will be chaos. People will resist. And we don't want project to be affected by resistance from the community. Because the time contract has been awarded, 6-month project, 8 months project, because of agitation, the contractor has been mobilized, fund has been raised, and now he cannot get to the site because of agitation. You can see time lag will lead to cost overrun. So it's good for us to ensure that we have the right methodology, and that is why we have that review. And next slide, we try to have what we call a more robust template that can give a kind of direction for the people involved in ensuring that right compensation is paid. We have a kind of itemized variables like the state, the botanical name, the crop type, the native name, the picture, planting rate, maturity period, harvest per hectare per stand, number of harvest per season, average productive economic year, cost of production, and farmer price gauge. These are some of the variables that provide a good methodology for a valuer to be able to ensure that when he or she is involved in compensation, the project affected person is given a fair compensation. Let us always know the word fair compensation. Fair, something that is just relatively. If it could happen in another situation, what will be done? And when people have that ideal methodology, the people rejoice, they are happy, see, and the new price, happiness, jubilation to the individual, to the family. Let me also stress the fact that anytime one's land is acquired, emotionally you are weakened. Psychologically you are affected. I will be displaced. But recently my land was acquired. I said, now it's my turn to be a project affected person. They acquired my land, and up to now they have not paid me. They collected my BVN, collected my picture, collected everything except my wife. If we don't get it right, it might be our turn tomorrow. That's where I'm going. Say it doesn't concern me. The day it will concern you, will feel the shock. You will feel the heat. So it is very important that we get people happy. Not that you want to pack government money and give people unnecessarily. Government is not a charity organization. But what we are saying is that we must be deliberate in ensuring that we are fair to the people we are dealing with. Next slide. The topic given to me, a lot of team, intertwining, but I will try as much as possible to show the relationship between land and climate change and sustainability. Climate change, a lot has been said about climate change yesterday. The earth, boom. shaking in various forms. I don't want to go back to yesterday. I'm a climate change expert, but I don't want to bore you. But summarily, a lot of things happen. You see pollution, you see the refuse. Some of these climate change issues in Nigeria that we Christian climate change are human change. Some of them are human being induced. You know, you are going, you have a pure water sachet, you drink water, you wind down, you just throw it like that. You know, you have accumulated heaps. They say it's climate change. You are blocking the drainage, and when you are blocking the drainage, it will be flooded. It's climate change. Government come and pay for us. But we are also responsible. Our negligence, our action, and that is why as Nigeria, we must begin to have a change of mindset. We cannot hand over this country to our generation if we have not perfected our relationship, if we have not perfected our action. We need to show them the right way of doing things. You see some of the erosion, you see heat, you see flood, you see the fine girl, you know, instead of her to be in the school looking for water. A lot of issues, complicated environmental challenges. Next slide. Okay. Land is very central to climate change activities, right? Land supplies, our actions affect the depletion of the ozone layer and the likes, and it comes back to land. If you look at that brief chart, you see the land is central. And where land is central, it goes with compensation, it goes with acquisition, it goes with buying, it goes with a lot of things, right? Industrialization, greenhouse gases, climate change, disaster. And when disaster happens, it happens on the land. And when there is disaster, people are forced to leave their community, to leave their property, or they voluntarily leave. You know, Nigerians are very stubborn. When there is disaster, government say, leave this place. They say, no, we will not leave. Nothing will happen until the thing happens. So people leave, and there may also be need for compulsory land acquisition, you know, for planning purpose. In climate change, you plan, you acquire certain land for planning purpose and for mitigation measure. And that will also lead to compensation and construction of climate resilient infrastructure. So in it, we have land that supplies some of those issues, and the land is also receiving them, and also it will lead to various action on land, including compulsory acquisition and compensation. We could also see that our action as human, goes a long way in influencing our environment. It's also going a long way in influencing what happens on land. You see somebody buying a land, building on the drainage. You see this is a drainage, building on it, and when government wakes up tomorrow and asks you to leave, you cry. We cannot leave. We are not going to leave. We have been living here for 50 years. It doesn't matter. You can be there for 100 years. What is wrong is wrong, and there must be a change. According to a Chinese proverb, be not afraid of growing slowly. We must grow as a country. We can't remain stagnant. The only thing we can be afraid of, is to stand still. We can't afford to stand still as a nation. We can't afford to be doing things the way we have been doing it and expecting different results. Next slide. Okay, remember this guy, Sonny Okosu, one of Nigeria's foremost singers. He sang about Nigeria. He conceptualized. It appears he saw what is happening and gave a brief song, Which Way Nigeria? Thank you. Which way Nigeria? I love my fatherland. Which way Nigeria? If you listen to this song, it's about 5 minutes song. it summarizes, a kind of the situation we have found ourselves. Next slide. In view of the potential dangers of climate change on food security and farming, the mitigating role is not only very important but equally urgent. Land is pivotal, is central in mitigating climate change effect. It is therefore recommended as follows. 1. Just few recommendations. If you listen to my presentation on Monday, it was so comprehensive. Just I extracted a few. We should consult essay surveyors and valuers during project conceptualization. 2, compensation should be handled by essay surveyors and valuers, and they should be engaged directly by the acquiring authority. We've seen a situation whereby somebody will be given a total package of either AIA, and he wants to subcontract to a valuer, and he wants to dictate what will happen. We plead with our partners to always remove that chunk of activity and deal directly with estate surveyors and valuers. Delay in paying compensation should be discouraged, and where it occurs, adequate interest should be paid. In the resettlement plan, deliberate provisions should be put in place that will ensure that project affected persons are not worse than their pre-acquisition condition. Finally, protecting the environment, mitigating against its effect, and even having the right methodological approach is a collective responsibility. I want to talk to the mind of essay surveyors and valuers, and I want to plead with us. When it comes to compensation valuation, the money is not coming from our pocket. It is the acquiring authority that is paying. Let's give what is due to Caesar. Let's give them their dues. Let's try as much as possible empathize with them. Let's try as much as possible to have a good conscience. Whatever we do today, one day we will stand before God and give account of our actions or our inaction. We also want to send message to Nigerians. They should not frustrate government effort in providing infrastructure to the people. This is the project that will benefit you. How can you explain it? Because you want to squeeze the government. Nothing is on your land, and you are where they want to do compensation. You now bring one Ojuju Calabar, you pour red oil. A time is coming, we'll be having spiritual general who will determine the efficacy of your idol. Enough is the discipline that you can't touch this thing just because the money is coming from government. You are creating a lot of tension. We will create an office, spiritual general, that will validate the authenticity of your idol. Otherwise, before I drop the mic, about 30 years ago, the Omonile were to acquire our land forcefully, to resell our land. Then my daddy went to the city room, brought us small idol like that. It was a decoration we have been putting on our TV for years. My dad said, I will curse you with it. And they ran away. I said, just like that? If my dad can deceive them with such decorating idol, please, we appeal to Nigerians. Let us be truthful to ourselves. Let us always see ourselves as partnering with government. That is when the methodology can work. Don't derail the methodology. Do not deceive the government. Finally, I want to plead with all government agencies as much as possible. We don't have the right to go to somebody's land who has not been paid. It's an injustice. You have done the valuation, you have done the company, he has not been paid, you enter the person's land. It's at the state level. Let us always educate our superior. Let us always educate the governor. Mr. Governor, sir, no, we have to pay the people. So we could see conclusively that inclusiveness is pivotal for us ensuring that we have the right methodological, right approach, and by so doing, we're mitigating a lot of climate change effect. Good morning.
Thank you. The next paper title is Approaches to Unlocking Women's Access to Land and Sustainable Development. And the paper will also be given by another Dean of Environmental Sciences from University of Lagos, Professor Modupe Omiru. Professor, welcome, sir.
Good morning, sirs and ma'ams, and you will please permit me to stand on the existing protocol. Somebody said yesterday that professors are not good at protocols. The person didn't tell a lie. So let me hide by saying that I'm standing on the protocol already established. Thank you very much indeed. However, with your permission, I'd like to acknowledge someone who others haven't said much about, but I feel I should say a little bit. And that is Mrs. Noni Ogogome Okolo. She's hiding her face. Yes, seeing her here and just seeing her here is a joy to me, because she used to be a student in the University of Lagos several years ago, and I'm very proud to see how far she has achieved. Thank you very much. Yes, sirs and ma'ams, we are on to a very important topic: unlocking women's access to land and sustainable development. It's a very crucial topic because so far, the aspect of women's land rights, even though it has gained a lot of interest internationally, has not yet been adequately resolved, especially from the land administration perspective. I feel that an occasion like this, an opportunity like this, particularly in a conference that is focusing on the issue of equitable management of land resources, treating women issues is extremely important because they belong to the group of the marginalized, the group of those who have not been given adequate attention in the way we have been packaging laws and acting on them, implementing them, and ensuring that resources are adequately distributed. So I want to salute the presence of mind of those who planned this conference and who included this topic so that it can be focused upon and discussed at length. Thank you very much indeed. Women are very important people. Never mind the fact that internationally now there are many departures from the normal concept of womanhood. These days, a man will wake up and say, I think I'm a woman, and then dress like a woman and start behaving like a woman. That does not make him a woman, because what a woman can do, no man can do it. So land is critical. In any society, land is a resource that you cannot in any way replace. You cannot substitute for as easily as you can substitute for other resources. It's so fundamental and it's so essential. It determines people's livelihood, it determines food security, it determines economic development, it determines the welfare of people, it determines how easily you can create wealth, it determines how well you can hold wealth, it determines so many things. In fact, land is everything. I used to tell my students that land is so fundamental that by the time you search into history, you will see that almost every revolution that ever happened because of land. Almost every conflict that ever happened within countries and between countries happened because of land. And I'm glad that yesterday, one of our speakers alluded to the fact that most of the conflicts going on in the world right now are land related. Talk about Gaza Strip, talk about the problem in Syria, almost everywhere is always land that is at the bottom of it all. So if we can do anything to ensure that the land resources we have are properly managed in such a way that we avoid conflicts, we take care of welfare, we also ensure that we can benefit from wealth creation, then we would have done ourselves and the future generations a great deal of benefit. So our focus on sustainable development is also apt because land is a critical factor in ensuring that that happens. Pardon me if I don't strictly follow my slides. It's because there's a lot more to say than what appears in the slide, and the time is short. So I may not say this slide, that slide. Just forgive me. The slides were prepared mostly as a guide, but the discussion is very, very important. So what makes women's access to land so important? Number one is a sure way of ensuring social equity and gender equality. There was an effort yesterday to make a distinction between equity and equality. What we are really after is the issue of fairness. We may not necessarily be equal in terms of height, size, shape, taste, and all the rest of it, but let us have opportunity that is equally available so that there is equity, there's fairness in the system, there's justice. That's what we are for. So for women, access to land helps in a lot of ways to achieve that justice, to achieve that fairness. And it helps to correct a lot of anomalies in society. A lot of people go through life in serious problems because other people try to lord it over them and try to subjugate them and feel that their place is to be inferior and to be ordered here and there. And they don't see that that person you are lording it over may have something to contribute that could actually enhance your welfare and your enjoyment of life. So it's very important that we correct some of the views that have been flying about for long, since ages ago, that women, they will say, what are you? A mere woman. As if a woman is nothing. A woman is a lot. A woman is everything. And so when we look at the access of women to land, we are talking about something that is extremely fundamental, because through ensuring that women gain access to land, you are able to make your economy more viable. You're able to assure yourselves of food security. You're able to ensure that generations to come, the future generations, are well catered for. Virtually everywhere I've been, and somebody has been giving tribute about how they lived their lives, how they got to a certain stage, most of the time they always make reference to their mother. Oh, my mother did this. Oh, my mother did that. I wouldn't be here today if not for my mother. My mother was poor, but she saw me through school. My mother did this. She carried the load for people just so that I could survive. Women have some innate qualities that make them to bring the best out of virtually nothing. But we don't need to keep them caged in that situation where they are unable to get the best simply because we have cultural ideas, we have legal restrictions and other things that alienate them from what could do them a lot of good and what could benefit society more widely as a result. Right. The fact that we are focusing on women helps us to look at the issue of inclusivity, helps us to look at the idea of equitable power sharing. It also helps us to check out how much capacity is there for women to express themselves, and in expressing themselves, how much benefit are they able to generate for us as a nation and for our development. So it's very important we focus on this issue. In recognition of its importance, the United Nations years back put gender equality as one of the agenda under the Sustainable Development Goals. Goal number 5 and the target number 1 there says that nations should undertake reforms to give women equal rights to economic resources, as well as access to ownership and control over land and other forms of property, financial services, inheritance, and natural resources in accordance with national laws. Now, that goal was defined as a means of helping nations to focus on what is necessary for them to do in order that we might be able to get a more sustainable environment. There's a link between women's access to land and food security, for instance. There's a link between women's access to land and sustainable use of the environmental assets that we have. There's a link between engaging women in land-related activities under a kind of organized situation that gives them opportunity to take decisions, to contribute to policy making. There's benefit in doing those things. And when we deny, then we lose out on those benefits. So I want us to look at the importance of women's access to land, and then check out where do we stand? How much access is actually there right now? Where do we need to go, and what needs to be done? Right. Even in a democratic situation, or whatever system of government you have in place, there is need to acknowledge the fact that women as a group have a fantastic role to play. Unfortunately, despite all of this, women are often subjugated and they are made to suffer marginalization. There are discriminatory practices that relegate them to a secondary place in society. Traditionally, in most of our societies in Nigeria, there's that idea that women should be under the men. So even in our inheritance practices, focus is put on the men, and the women are expected to hold land maybe through a husband or through a brother and so on, as if they, as human beings, are too unintelligent or incapable of thinking through on what needs to be done to make themselves more productive. Despite all that, statistics, the people who are in charge of, assessing and monitoring what is going on from time to time tell us that less than 10% of women in agricultural activities have sole ownership of land in Nigeria, as against 34.2% of men. And this is not limited to Nigeria. It's almost the same in most developing countries. 43% of agricultural laborers are women in Nigeria. And these are the people who have ownership of only 10% of agricultural land. In 2023, the Ministry of Women Affairs averred that 10% of land ownership in Nigeria belongs to women, but they account for 70 to 80% of the labor force. That's even more alarming when you look at it thoroughly. So if these women are working so hard, shouldn't they have a right to be able to freely take decisions about some of the most critical resources that they must make use of? So while we are looking at the fact that these systems are the way they are, let us try and break it into pieces. Where do the problems come from? What are those things that hinder women's access to land, and what can we do about them? First, we have a land tenure system. Characteristically in Nigeria, we have what we call a dichotomous system, the customary and the statutory. The statutory system is inherited because of our colonial history, while the customary system is homegrown, the one that we really grew up with. We find that while the statutory system, at least on the face of it, doesn't seem to discriminate much against women, the customary practices, the traditional land tenure systems, tend to hold more evidence of discrimination. Nigeria's land tenure systems are deeply rooted in traditional and cultural heritage. They're often based on customary laws and beliefs that stem from, long-rooted ideas generated by the forefathers. In some societies, women are seen as property. So when a man dies, his wife passes along with the property to his main successor. They call it the levirate marriage, in which case a younger brother could take over the wife. And as he does so, what he sees most of the time is that she will add to his labor force in order to make his agricultural holdings more viable. He sees her as another opportunity to breed more children, again to add to the labor force. Thank God some of those ideas are changing. However, they have done a lot of harm in the past, and they are still very much filtering into some of the ways some of those who are in charge of policy making, who are in charge of distribution of resources, are thinking. Customary land ownership can be broken into several types. There's communal ownership, in which case the land is commonly regarded as belonging to the community. In that case, nobody in particular owns it. And then we have a family ownership, which is defined by one of my old lecturers as the cognatic system, because it comes through the bloodline. So somebody who doesn't belong to a family cannot come and claim ownership of land in that family. All these patterns are guided by things to do, like, for instance, the fact that we have a patrilineal inheritance system. Our properties pass through the males, through the men, to the sons, and so on and so forth. But we must also remember that some of our inheritance practices do have some element of thinking about the women, although not necessarily as people who will own or get the land. For instance, in Yoruba land, if a man dies, traditionally, systems of inheritance that could be used in distributing his properties include idigi. Idigi means according to the number of wives, pastapis in English, which means that the property will be distributed according to the number of wives he has. Although the property will not go to the woman, it will go to her children. So if he has 3 wives, the property will go according to the number of wives, 3. They will share the properties into 3, and then the children inherit those that belong to the mother, that came through the parts that should go to the mother. Then we have the Ori-Ojori, which means, equally among all the children. So Ori-Ojori means everybody gets an equal share. And then we have the dowry system, in which case it is the first male in the family that takes over all the property. Some of the things I'm mentioning will be things that you probably recognize as happening in your place, or you have variants of it anyway. So these systems have long existed, but not any of them puts priority on the woman as someone who can inherit, and through her, other things. Okay, then there are widowhood practices that even disenfranchise the woman completely, that throw her away, when the man dies. I'm sorry, I'm having to say that a lot, man dies, because normally in our society, the men, women die too, but the fact is that the men used to marry women who are much younger than themselves, and so it stands to reason. So when these things happen, the widow is left behind, and if she's not from that locality, you can bet she'll be chased out immediately. And even in modern times, if she has been part of those that acquired the property that the family is pointing at, she would still be asked to leave, because the tradition in that society probably allows the brothers to inherit, and then she herself becomes part of the package of things to be inherited. So some of those traditional practices, customary practices, are not helpful at all. they have disenfranchised women, they have impoverished women, they have rendered many women unable to cater for their children and for their own selves. They have rendered them dependent on the men folk. And in some instances also, it has exposed them to exploitation, because those who feel they have the right to the property would now, be trying to use all kinds of manipulation to get them to agree to things that may be below their principle in order that they might have access to their land. So these things tied up together as the traditions or customary practices, marriage system, inheritance system, they are a package of hindrances on their own. But thank God, things are changing little by little. A place like Anambra State recently passed a law that, negates the idea of maltreating widows and also gives some modicum of assistance when it comes to inheriting their late husband's property. So, apart from customary issues, there are many other hindrances. Some of them even under the statutory system. Now, our constitution in Nigeria, the 1999 constitution, does not discriminate against women. Our Land Use Act of 1978 does not discriminate against women. In all these laws, they simply say, like in quotes, whoever is asking for, any citizen that is applying should be treated, should be done this and done that. However, when it comes to the implementation, it's another kettle of fish. That is when, I'm sorry to make reference, but this is what we hear from those who have passed through some of these efforts to get land. In some instances, a woman applies legitimately through the system that is established. However, somebody, one place or other, might want her to do more than is required by law in order to get an allocation. They would not do such a thing to a man, but a woman gets such things, demands that are beyond them every now and again. And sometimes they end up not getting anything at all because they will not succumb to demands. Corruption in the system is a huge part of what hinders women's access to land. What have we said so far? We said this, the traditional system, the customary laws, the inadequate implementation of statutory laws, the corruption in the system that hinders women from being able to get what is due to them without any manipulation, and even then, some ways in which we handle things, the bureaucracy, the costs involved in getting land, and so on and so forth. They are part of what makes access to land for women extremely problematic. Once again, I apologize. I may not be following the paper you were given, but I just want us to concentrate on those key elements. The time I'm allotted is not enough to really deal with the issues as deeply as one would like to do. So there is bureaucracy too as one of the major hindrances. This one, the bureaucracy is arising from the way the law has stipulated that applications be treated, the notices that need to be given, the payments, the cost element comes in, the payments that need to be made. A woman applies, a man also applies. This is something that any gender can do. And what do we find? You have to get tax clearance for the last 3 years. You have to show evidence of belonging to, in Lagos State, for instance, you must show evidence of this or that. Apart from that, you have the statutory charges that you need to pay. And then once you pay all those things, it does not completely guarantee that your application will be treated immediately or within the time frame within which you need the land, or that you even get it at the end of the day. You might end up waiting for quite a long time. It used to be up to 5 more and more years in the past. I did a survey then and found that there were applications waiting in line for years on end. Over that period, in some instances, some of the applicants might even die. In some instances, those who are able to wait it through find that by the time they get their allocation, maybe economic situation has changed and their capability to prosecute the investment they had in mind is no longer as strong as it used to be. That is a major issue too. So bureaucracy is another very serious hindrance. Apart from bureaucracy, like I said, the cost element, the demands on what needs to be paid in order that your application will be accepted, in order that your allocation will be made, they are all there as things that hinder women. And then yet again, on top of that, is the issue of the need for the applicant to be literate enough to even understand what he's supposed to do, what he's supposed to write in the forms, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, many women are not as literate as is required, and so have to use an agent or use somebody or don't even know at all that they can get allocation if they do make an effort. So this is yet another thing. Then we have market-related hindrances. It's possible to get land through the statutory system, through the laws, through the allocation system. It's also possible to buy land in the market. But when it comes to buying land in the market, we find that many women do not have the financial capacity to bargain for land because prices are beyond what they can afford. And in most instances, they end up not being able to ever have that dream of owning property achieved. Now, how do we resolve that? We will talk about that shortly. Then, apart from cost issues and the land markets, the cost element, the price element in the land market, there is a fact that even in the market, private landowners often discriminate against women. They find women, some would say derogatory things about women, and when somebody is fronting for her to negotiate, they will still ask, who is the person that wants to buy? I want to know. And then they start making all kinds of snide remarks and all the rest of it. Although in many instances, if she comes and she has enough capital to pay what the owner demands, he might be willing to let the land go. But these undue barriers make land acquisition, access to land, extremely difficult for women, whether they want to use the land for agricultural food production, or they want to use it to house themselves in an urban area, in a peri-urban area, or they want to use it for one other purpose or the other. So the need for us to sit down as directors of lands is very, very critical. What can we do from the point of view of land administration to address some of these difficulties? What can we do by way of people who are experts in handling land matters to ease some of the restrictions and difficulties that are placed on the path of women? How can we remove gender bias from some of the things we do? Then the aspect of policies that run how people gain access at all in the society. What can we do to ensure that policies are packaged in a gender-sensitive way? In fact, right now, how gender-sensitive are our policies? On the face of it, there's no discrimination because there's nothing said against. But then, at the same time, there are issues that we see affecting how things are being done. So I want us to look at what we can do and how to do them quickly. First and foremost, I want to encourage us to try and understand the women as people in society who have a right to invest, who have a right to contribute, who have a right to be part of the productive system. We need to change the mindset, the perception of women. Not all women are weak, incapacitated, and dependent. Give them a little opening, and you can see what great benefits they can bring to society. So we need to also look at those bureaucratic hurdles. How can we ease them so that when a woman applies and when a man applies too, both gender, all obstacles can be cleared without any difficulty, and they can gain access without needing to do things that are not appropriate. How can we deal with the corruption in the system? Are there ways to check these corrupt activities and to eliminate them so that the road will be clear for people to get what is needed? Then also, we need to look at the possibilities of increasing women's awareness of the processes, the procedures that they can adopt in order to get land and get it without all the stress. Then how can we reduce the cost of acquisition procedures? I've been told my time is even lesser than I thought. So I think we need to begin to look at these things. Number one, let us see how we can ensure that women's land rights are factored into policies. Many policies are gender blind. Let us make them gender sensitive. Let the issue of women's needs be carried into these policies. So at the next review of policies, let there be a major focus on are women being adequately served, or is there still a bias that we need to eliminate? Then also, let us look at those cultural barriers and let us see how we can address them. I gave the example of Anambra State, where the government has done something very, very important to take away some of the sufferings that women encounter when they are widowed and their husband's properties are taken away from them. That is a good example that can be followed. But I think a forum like this can lead the direction of what needs to be done, because virtually every state has someone in charge of land matters that is represented in a forum like this. So we need to follow up with land reform initiatives. We need to encourage community-based approaches to inclusivity in land management matters. So we don't just look at, oh, the law says this, therefore we just follow hook, line, and sinker. Let's look for those things that can make the community to be involved, that can make the community to have a say in what happens about how their land is distributed, and to ensure that the women are part of the talk. Let us adopt advocacy approaches. Let us see how to build women's capacity to make their demands known in a structured and acceptable way. Let us see how we can improve women's access to credits, because if they have credit, if they have money, then they might be able to compete more appropriately to get access to land. Let us see how we can do community outreaches to educate the women about land availability, about land accessibility, the processes they need to adopt to get the land. Let us also include women representation in things like physical planning, in things like agricultural land, zoning, in things like allocation of the land and things like that. Let us see how we can get them to be a voice to be heard among those that are being consulted when decisions are being taken and allocations are being made. In the urban area, there are problems with land scarcity, problems with pervasive informality, problems with discrimination too is still there, because in the land market, this is a very serious matter. Then let us see how we can encourage the women to even bring up ideas, to submit proposals, and let those proposals be fairly considered. Let them not be jettisoned just because they are being brought by a women group. Let us look at them fairly, assess them. If they are going to be beneficial on the long run, let's see how we can factor them into any decisions we're taking at that time. Then also, let us look at empowering women through advocacy in the area of acquiring land, even to form cooperatives. There can be cooperatives for agricultural purposes, cooperatives for housing construction. I visited Italy several years ago, and I was happy to find myself accommodated in a block of flats. There are several blocks like that had been produced by a cooperative. And they were producing very good accommodation, comfortable, affordable, and it's the kind of thing that cooperatives do and can do if they are given necessary opportunity. So let's see how we can boost our women's capacity, even in that regard. Also, we have several countries where some of these things have been tried successfully. We can also consult with international bodies that are into women land rights issues. We can collaborate with them in the area of research, because it's good to find out, carry out gender-directed research. What do the women think? What are their priorities? What do they think they don't have that they need to have? How can we build it in? You can foster research into these areas so that we can have a more gender-sensitive approach to doing things. I don't want to overshoot the time given me, and I'm sure that during the question and answer time, there might be more opportunity to look further into these things. So we can do partnerships and collaborations. We can encourage means whereby women can get finance. We can encourage means whereby some of those obstacles can be dealt with. By way of rounding up, let me stress, we must be intentional. If we are simply paying lip service, or we are saying these things because it is fashionable internationally to say such, or for one political reason or the other, we will not be helping ourselves. We will not be helping the economy. We will not be helping the women folk. We have to be intentional in pursuing women's access to land. We must be intentional in addressing the barriers, and also in ensuring that equity is served when it comes to weighing the balance between those who get the access, who get the land at the end of the day, and those who don't. Then also, I want to say that the policies we bring up must ensure that they are focused on what is best for women, best for men too, I keep saying that, best for society in general. To me, what is best is what ensures that every sector of society gets an advantage, gets an opportunity, and gets recognized for who they are and for what they do. Then we must also recognize the fact that some of these things are very, very complex. They are not simple things that we can just take a decision and go to sleep. So we must monitor consistently and continuously how whatever we introduce by way of mitigation strategies are working out. That means from time to time we go back, we engage the women, we ask them questions again, we fine-tune, and then we go back again. Land rights will not be discriminatory if the role of each sector of society is well understood. My belief is that those in charge, they're humans too. They see these things and will be very happy to do what is necessary if given the right push. I hope the little I've said will give them the right push and will enable us also to do the needful. Thank you very much for listening.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's appreciate Professor Modupe once again. Please jot down your questions and comments. After the third paper, we'll now take question and answer session. The next paper is titled Systematic Land Titling and Registration, a tool for squaring indigenous title and climate change in the face of resilience. And that paper will be given by Dr. Fitka Bishaka from Nasarawa State University, Kepi. A round of applause for Doctor.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me quickly appreciate the organizers of this very important conference that bring all the professionals together to share experience. Let me also most sincerely appreciate my senior colleagues from the PCCLR. Thank you for coming to us. And my paper has already been, please can you, oh, okay, thank you. Let me say this before I go into the presentation. My professor told me that if you put too much pictures in your presentation, it means people will get lost, because people will just be carried out by the euphoria of the pictures, and they will not really understand what you are trying to put across. That is his own perspective. But I, as a student of that professor, I took it that yes, it's right. Some believe that though put too much pictures, when people see the pictures, they will agree that what you are saying is right, or what you are saying is not right. But for me, in my presentation, you might not see pictures, but you will see diagrams. And diagrams tells you what we are trying to say. Let me also say this. So much has been said about climate change, climate change, climate change, climate change. I deliberately removed it from my own presentation because I felt too much has been said. And so let me go into exact what we feel we should be discussing today. Lastly, let me send this as an apology to the whole House that 2 presentations were sent to the Secretariat. Unfortunately, I think the wrong paper was printed. Some of the things that were added in the final paper is not what is being circulated to members. So please, I have asked the Secretariat to please maybe do that amendment and send it to members. Thank you. Next slide, please. This is the outline of my presentation. I have about 11 there to look at. First, the introduction. The second one is the Essentials of Land Use Allocation Act. The next one is the Land Administration and Registration. The next one is requirements for good land governance. The next one is land governance situation in Nigeria. The next one is cadastral infrastructure as goes down. Next slide. Sorry, let me take my glass. In terms of land administration, for any country, developed or undeveloped country, or developing countries, its primary aim is to bring relative ease to land dealings and transactions. In Nigeria, the power of land is given to the governors, and the governors are supposed to hold this land for us in trust so that we can use it for everybody to get access to land. Unfortunately, maybe the governors are too busy and sometimes they don't follow the looking at, okay, let's see how we can give land to people to use. And so it is, in my thinking, that it is important that we legislate a nationwide computerized legislation, registration that will be open, transparent, and accessible to everyone. Since the commencement of land administration, if we may agree to ourselves, record has it that less than 3% of the total land mass of Nigeria is registered, is surveyed and registered. In most of our registries, completely zero. And so that already is a problem. Then, this paper, the systematic land titling and registration is embedded, not really embedded in the Constitution, but is a thinking of some group of people who were assigned by federal government to come up with an idea. How do we give this land to everybody? And that is why the issue of systematic land titling came up. There are 2 approaches to land registration. One is sporadic and one is systematic. The sporadic approach is that you go to government and you tell government that you need piece of land, and government decides to give you to develop. It's tedious, it's expensive, it's time consuming. And that is why you find out that today, most of our land operations are sporadic approach. That is why we don't have enough land registered. Then the other one is a systematic. That is the approach that we feel that every piece of land within a given area will be captured and registered. And then the owners will benefit from such piece of land. Next. The Essentials of Land Use Act. What are the Essentials of Land Use Act? Successful implementation of Land Use Act, where there's need for consistency and standardization of land management and control throughout the country under the Land Use Act. Functional and transparent land management processes are currently absent completely. They are not there in the Land Use Act. They are not there. And so we cannot really say that, well, our land activities are transparent. Since when the Land Use Act came in 1978, land administration has become more tedious, and land tenure security is increasing alarming proportion every day. It's not there. The land registration process is becoming more uncertain. You are not sure whether your title will be registered or will not be registered. Somebody was telling me a story that he bought a piece of land here in the Federal Capital Territory, and it took him 3, 4, 5 years. It's not yet registered because of the tedious process involved, because of the corrupt nature of the process that is involved. And so we must, as seated here, we must be able to come up with ideas that will bring transparency in our land administration, especially the directors from the states, because most of the land are from the states. So the directors from the states have more responsibility than trying to get this system that we're going to talk about, so that every piece of land in your state is captured and registered. Next slide. So what's the whole essence of land administration? Why do we carry land administration? To ensure that the rules of tenure are applied, made operational through a set of systems and processes found in an institution. These systems and processes will eventually come into determine, recording, and disseminating information about the ownership, the value, and then the land used of that particular piece of land. These are the three things. When the process is correct, what we are trying to do is to determine the ownership. Land registration, on the other hand, is critical. The process which allows the recording of rights in land in public registers. If I may ask the directors from the states, do you have functional registrars? I'm not sure if I can get 1 or 2 from any of the states that will tell me, yes, we have a functional land register in our state. Very unfortunate. So it's a challenge to all of us. As we go back to our states, we should be able to take something home from this discussion. then yes, we must create a functional register so that there will be transaction, so that there will be economic empowerment to our people. Land records, where land rights are recorded in writing, that is where you have the records. When these documents are written, documented, these documents are usually not always lodged for safekeeping. They are not. Sometimes you go to ministries, go to the land registries and see in the states, you wept. Maybe a land that has been surveyed in 20 years ago. Find out the records. You can't see it. Because we don't have registers. But generally, we have there are types. We have the deed register, and then also the title register. But they're not visible in the states. I'm not sure whether in the federal capital city here, whether FCD or FCT, they also have a functional land register, land registry. So that is a challenge for all of us seated in this room this morning. But in some states or in some land organizations, they have the hybrid, where the two are there, but they're not really functional. But you can get the two out there. Next slide, please. What do you require for good land governance? What do you require? There are requirements. One of the basic requirements for good land governance is the knowledge that you have about the property, who owns what, and where is it. That's one of the basic requirements for a good land governance. You must be able to know where that land is and who owns it. The second requirement is the security of tenure. Where the land don't have security of tenure, there's no good land governance there, because anything can happen to the property. So you must have very secured land tenure system. Another requirement is the land good governance must be transparent, must be participatory. People should be able to participate. It's not something you just go and click some people at the corner and then you come out with a title and you expect people to accept that this is the title of the property you have. No, it must be transparent. It must be participatory. And it must be accountable. Yesterday somebody mentioned about accountability. You cannot account for something that is not transparent. If it's not transparent, you can't account for it. So it must be transparent, it must be participatory, and it must be accountable. Then, you must also have a comprehensive evidence base. What is the evidence base? Yes, this is the actual owner of the title. Yes, it is this woman that owns this property before you take off registering. Then the procedures in trying to achieve good land governance must be clear, must be simple, and it must be made public. Once it's not public, once it's not simple, you bring a big and a very difficult process, people begin to suspect you. So your process must be very simple, very clear, and then to the public. Also, the cost of doing this thing, what I have just mentioned in the first four, must be affordable. Cannot bring a bill that cannot be afforded by 70% of the population. When you do that, you're just wasting, and you are just not helping the society. You are not helping those that are involved. Adequate human and institutional policies, capacity, for the land administration must be clear to have a good land governance. Then there should be also appropriate institutional arrangement. You must make provision for proper and appropriate institutional arrangement. Then you look at the regulations. What do the regulations say about this? What does the regulation say about locating the land here? All these are things that will aid us to have good land governance. When this is lacking, certainly our land governance will not be transparent. And when it's not transparent, what do you expect? The answer is best known to all of us. Then, the special data must be clearly get the coordinates or the graphic maps to really define the boundary of your property, of the land. So when you have all these 11 things that I have mentioned here, and you obey them judiciously, then you will find out that the issue of good land governance will be guaranteed. Next slide. Land governance situation in Nigeria. We are back home now. Let's talk about ourselves as Nigerians. Maybe what we were talking before, we are making a generic, involves other parts of the world, but we are coming back home to Nigeria. And that is why that's why we are gathering in this room today. It is unfortunate, which we have all agreed, which all the speakers that spoke yesterday and today have agreed, that our lands have not been properly documented, nor registered. I'm not sure if there's any state that will stand up boldly and tell us here that in my state we have registered conveniently with a functional register 20 to 50,000 landed properties. I don't know. I'll be happy to get that. So that is the reason, these are the reasons for the reform. These are the reasons for the reform that we're trying to do, or that the federal government have decided to set a committee about 13 years ago, 14 years ago. How then do we solve these problems? How then do we unlock these problems that are facing us as a nation? And that is the essence for the land reform. Because if the land are not properly registered, how then do we carry transactions? How then do you benefit? How then do you raise the economy of somebody staying in the village? How? He doesn't even bother because the land is there, he's farming, maybe he's not farming, he's not using the land, because they don't even know what to do with the land. Because those of us in government, the directors, have not been able to sit down and think of something that can benefit that man from the rural area. One important issue to note, why we are facing these problems today, is because our country is poorly mapped. We don't have available maps in the country. Maybe there's some state capitals. Maybe. But to have a map of the entire country, maybe at 1 in 50,000, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But if the records are available, let them make the records available for people to see. If you have done it and you just keep it in your house or you keep it in your office, it means you are not helping the society. And so researchers will feel that these things are not there. But if you have the boldness to say, yes, in my state we have the map of our state capital, 1 in 50,000. I would like to discuss with you after this gathering, because that will help us. There are a lot of things that we need to do, but because we don't have the maps, the country is poor mapped, so certain things cannot be done. Therefore, there's the need. That's why we said there's this need for this reform. And then we come up with systematic land titling. Large-scale topographic map is completely off the street. We don't have. Maybe the records are there, but like I said, some people are hiding the records. So what you are hiding the records, sense does it make? You are making it difficult for the country to move forward, because lack of topographic maps cannot help us to develop. So, then, next slide, please. Cadastral infrastructure. I will leave that for us to read, because it's a straightforward thing. So you just read that and understand what we're talking about, cadastral information, cadastral infrastructure. Status of mapping in Nigeria, I've already mentioned, is very poor. I've already mentioned it. Then, the main point of our discussion, an overview of systematic land titling and registration, SLTR. I'll just pick one there, and then you read the rest. It's there in our books, in our papers. The SLTR boundaries can use satellite imagery, future interpretation, whether direct or indirect. Image boundary and parcel demarcations are defining the boundary. However, there's a quote there. However, they do not demarcate boundaries, but record existing demarcations. They don't define boundaries. That is the overview of systematic titling. To effectively achieve the main goal of the land reform, which is to empower Nigerians from all walks of life to have easy access to secure title to land, the systematic titling must be adopted. Must be. If really want to make land easier, land transaction easy for all of us, then the only way forward is systematic land titling. The process usually initiated by government for the purpose of knowing who owns what. I've said that earlier. I said in the sporadic approach, is you go to government. But a systematic is the government coming to you. Can we register your property so that you can now benefit from your own land? That's the essence of systematic land titling. We, the government, go to the people. And that's why I'm now talking directly to the directors. That your lands are locked in your states. You must have the confidence and the willingness to advise your governor. Can we carry a pilot to see how best we can help economize our people? There are three things that we need to pick up from systematic titling. The owner, that's the person. Then the land right that exists on that particular land. We must take note of the right that exists there. Because if you don't know the right, you cannot actually conclude. So you must know the right. Then the location and then the extent or the size of the plot is important. Next slide. Why is systematic land titling important? I've already explained. You can read the rest for yourself. I've given about 10 reasons. 10 reasons why it's important. I can only just maybe take one or two, then you read the rest yourselves. Significantly enhance the security of all landholders. Generates significant and predictable revenue for the government, both at federal, state, and local government. That's the importance of systematic land titling. That is why it is necessary that we look at it. On the number 11 says, a systematic approach must be more equitable than a sporadic approach, especially when the base map is used for land taxation to identify encroachment and other planning or environmental issues. Next slide. So what are the processes that is required for this land systematic titling? One, we have the pre-SLTR, where that is the phase that requires the legal policies, framework, tools, and materials. These include the manuals for the SLTR. You must design something, you must write up something that will guide the people that will be on the field. Then you must train them. You must train them. When you design this, when you write these processes, then you must train the people that you are sending to the field. Then planning. Well, planning talks about the land use allocation committee must be in place. You must put that in place. The Land Use Act emphasizes that. Then the Land Use Advisory Committee will also be put in place at the local government level. The recruitment of field and trained workers. Next, these are the processes that you need to follow. There are about 10. Preparation and sensitizing the people, mobilizing and training, recording of claims and demarcation, adjudication. These ones are what you do in the office and you take them to the field. But from number 6 down, there are things that you do in the office. You display. When you define the area, you must be ready to. Next slide, please. they've given me warning already. And I've talked about the manual, STR and manual. You design the manual so that those going to the field should be able to understand what to do on the field. Because if you don't give the manual, they will not be able to understand. So what do you expect them to do in the field? You don't know what to do. Then there must be community leaders. You know, I've told you that this one is the government going to the people. You cannot go to a place without the involvement of those people around the area. You must be involved in the community. The community must know of your presence. They must know that you are coming to do a work here. And they must agree with you. That is the beauty of systematic land titling. You don't force it on the people. The people must agree. Then I've already talked about the cadastral infrastructure, which contains the core stations, and then use of rectified image photographs and digital aerial photograph, GPS, and the rest of them. Those are there for you to read. Then human. I've already talked about it, the human resources. The people involved, there must be somebody we call maybe a state coordinator, maybe the director of land himself. Then you have another field team leader. You have the deputy. So that if you're not there, the work should not stop. But the work must continue. Then the requirements for other one, the standardization, the land office assistants, GIS experts, field team, village officials, they are all stated here. These are people that make up the team. These are people that make up the team. And so you must bring all these people together before you go on systematic land titling, demarcation of the boundary, of the area. We have 3 stages of the office. We have the front office, where we gather all the professionals, all. The land surveyors, the land surveyors, the lawyers, and the rest of them. We must sit down and agree. That is the front office. All these people must be there. You sit down, you IO for days. Then you come up with a resolution or an agreement. Then the middle, those are the people that adjudicate. The middle office. Those are people that, okay, yes, we have gone to the field. No, I disagree with the boundary. Then these people will sit down and look at, oh, the 2 of you didn't agree. They now look at it again. Then the last one, that is the back room. That is the office where all the activities is being carried out. All the field work, all everything that you have done, the register that you have prepared from the field, you now display for people to see, for people to agree with you that yes, the demarcation you have done about my property is correct. The name that you have put there is correct. You must place this for at least 30 days for people to see, so that people can now make comments, and just like what the INEC is doing. The INEC will display the names before you vote, so that you see your name. If there's a misspelling, you report back to INEC. And that's the same thing what SLTS is doing too. Check your name. Is the name correctly written? Is the plot of size correct? Is the location of the plot correctly captured? These are the things I need to check. Then other ones are there. The efficiency of the system is already there. It's just something that we can read. I just want to follow the timekeeper instruction so that let me not be penalized. Then I have some few recommendations to make. The first recommendation is that the appropriate cadastral survey using GNS rapid survey method rather than graphic method must be appropriate and in line with the existing cadastral protocol and regulation. That is after doing the general demarcations, and you want your final, maybe to surveyors to put the beacons around the plot. Because some of them were using aerial photographs, were using auto photos. But if you want the proper delineation of distance, then you must engage a qualified surveyor, a registered surveyor. When dealing with large number of plots of land using conventional methods, the cost would be low as 10% to to 20% of the surveying an individual plot. You have defined the boundary of SL area, and you did everything at the same time. You find that the cost will be less than you just come and pick somebody, oh, tomorrow you go and survey my own. Next tomorrow, another person will call him. The cost will be higher. So that will help us to reduce the cost. Ladies and gentlemen, my final take on this is that the federal government must ensure that we have large topographic cadastral maps, large scale map. That is the only way that we can move forward in this country. If those things are not there, we will not be able to do what we are trying to do. We must be ready to get those maps available. Thank you for listening.
Let's appreciate Dr. Fitzcarrald once again, ladies and gentlemen. We are now in the questions and answer session. We have listened to 3 presentations. So it's good to go now. We need another wireless mic. Wireless mic. Come this side.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for these insightful presentations. All the 3 presenters have done justice to all the areas they addressed. I want to just make a complimentary remarks to my mommy. She has done extensive work on land generally. She's one of those we actually revered in that domain. Just to complement an aspect of that research, I want us to take it further, because recently, as 2024, my mother got an inheritance of land of over 25 years of the death of her father, of the native land, because Islamic dimensions applied. She got a percentage of that land, and we have evidence to that effect. Similarly, we have done some other works to really make it holistic, so that it can be applied in the whole Nigeria, with dimension to inheritance and also access to land. I quite agree with you, there is a gap that need to be filled, and this kind of forum is very auspicious to deal with it. As recent as 2022, Ghana and 2018, Kenya made it a policy of every allocation in every land, in every state or region or at the country level, a certain percentage will be set aside for women. And that is not yet done in Nigeria. We need to propagate it, and we need to make sure that, because women are somehow vulnerable, because they don't have the space to compete with the men, even through the land use and allocation committee. The pressure from the men will just take them out. But if a certain percentage is allotted or designated for female to compete, in Kenya it's about 30% of the entire area. In Ghana it's about 15%. In South Africa it's about 15%. And so many other countries in Africa have taken the lead. So let's move in that direction so that it will really help us. With respect to systematic titling, this is something that has been advocated by some of us for more than a decade. It's just to simplify land registration processes. You don't need to have just one-off document for access to land or genuineness security to land. CFO should not just be one title that will be respected. There could be layers of such recognition given to title to land. And that's the hallmark of systematic land titling, because you bring in the front desk all the experts. I think somewhere there were little challenges when the parasurveyors component was introduced. But I think we should deal with that, because it's working in Rwanda, it's working in so many other countries, even in Kenya, where the social titling domain model has been deployed to it. Why can't it work in our own physical something? It's not everybody that want to take loan in the bank, for instance. Even at some primary mortgage institutions can decide to say that we recognize this level of titling at a certain level in the rural areas or in the suburban areas. Once the neighborhood can attest to it and the adjudication process is clear, that can give us a leeway in making progress to land title and increasing the percentage of how you can identify who owns what and where and what country. And that will take us to a very enviable height. We'll continue to work with my brother, Professor Kemiki, in this methodology component. It's very good for us to have a scientific approach and to enrich the process of sanctity of transparency, you know, as well as acceptability, so that we can all move as a nation forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next one there.
Thank you. Good morning. Oh, good afternoon, rather. I have a question for the last speaker, Dr. Steve. It's still on systematic land titling and registration. You see, I want to know how you intend to harmonize the records that you get from that exercise, you know, vis-a-vis the existing records in the registry. You know, for example, in so many states in Nigeria, they've been issuing titles using the sporadic method. Now, bearing in mind that some of these titles are encumbered, some are already subjects of litigation. If you start SLTR, how do you intend to harmonize the two records such that you don't issue title to somebody, you know, that already has a title that is encumbered, or, you know, all those issues? Then the second question is on issuance of customary titles, you know. The challenge I think we have in so many states is that how to delineate the interest of, you know, the area covered by the state vis-a-vis the local government. Because the state itself is made up of local governments, you know. In the state capital now, what part of it, the state capital is a local government. What part of it will be administered by state? What part is for, you know, can we categorize as rural, so to say? So can you, you know, explain to us if there is any yardstick or something that we can use as a guide to delineate rural vis-a-vis urban? Thank you.
Any other comment or questions? Yes. Let us take all the questions.
Yes, my question is to the first speaker, Professor Kemiki. Your diagram on land and climate change, you talked about the relationship between climate change and compensation payment, how compulsory acquisition, payment of compensation leads to construction of climate resilient infrastructure. My question is, in the light of this, Do we now stop acquisition and payment of compensation so that government will no longer construct climate resilient infrastructure? Or do private investors who acquire land directly from the people don't construct climate resilient infrastructure? I give an instance of what is currently going on in Abia State. After the improvement in their electricity supply, there are a lot of foreign companies trooping into Abia State. And their bus stops are not the state house. It's not the governor's office. But to the traditional rulers, who are the custodians of the land. And they have been acquiring land from these people, setting up industries. And very soon, there will be a lot of activities that will result to climate resilience. So what happens in this circumstance? I'm asking these questions here because we are directors of lands in our various states, and we are looking at how our activities leads to all of these. So what of these areas that are not directly under our control, what happens? Will it stop the issue of climate change? Thank you.
Madam, I saw your hand. Are you still? Okay. Over to the resource spaces.
Sorry, sir. Sir. Okay.
Okay, there's another one.
Good afternoon. I want to go directly to Professor Kemike also. In your paper, page 6, to be exact, talking about mitigating climate-induced risk through sustainable public measures. A place you said reducing the impact of climate change and its associated cost can be achieved by preventing further housing development in vulnerable areas, relocating existing settlements, and making prudent investments in more resilient infrastructure. I want to ask, does relocating people from where they are to where they don't want to be a measure to settle the people or prevent climate change dangers? That is one. What do you actually want to tell us about developing house in vulnerable areas as a measure to also check, climate change? Because what we are told is that when there are people who are likely to be affected by climate change factors, they are supposed to be fortified with the kind of houses that should be built in the area where they are, rather than relocating them to places where they can no longer cope. And I do not know what you mean by vulnerable areas. So can you explain? And Prof from UNILAG, you made a case for, to address women's land-related complaints when you suggested there should be need to set up an ombudsman. Whose responsibility will it be to set up ombudsman? That is a neutral intercessor to save the women from this type of plight. Again, you made allusion to Anambra State government 2 times when you are giving your lecture about what they did concerning women's rights of inheritance. Would there not be right in this type of meeting to have peer review mechanism in the sense that maybe the director of lands in Anambra State could have shared first-hand information with his colleagues in this place, maybe presenting documents on how the process went so others can share ideas. Thank you very much.
let's take the responses in the order of presentation. Rob, you have any question targeted at you? Is there any question targeted at you?
When I'm responding, I ask.
Madam, in the order of presentation, take your questions. Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir. I also thank those who ask questions because they will help us throw more light on the things that have been raised during the presentations. Thank you very much, Professor Nuhu. Your insightful suggestion that we should go the way of asking governments to reserve a proportion of whatever is to be allocated for women is very, very apt, particularly since there are examples that have already been done successfully in other countries. Now, what works in one country may not work in another, but at the same time, we must take account of the fact that this demonstrates that those governments are committed to ensuring that women get a share, even if it's not a 50-50 proportion. The fact that something is being reserved is an encouragement. One of the reasons why there may not be so many women coming out to say what they need lies in, number one, relative illiteracy and the need for advocacy and assistance in that area. And also the issue of women thinking that they won't give me anyway, so why do I bother? Which is something that also needs a similar approach, advocacy. We need to engage the women and let them know what is possible. So thank you very much, Professor Nuhu. This is something that the directors of lands should think about, and which also the governors of the states who have the reserved right under the Land Use Act to declare areas urban or rural, they should also think about. The last comment, which pertains to my paper, came from the last person who mentioned the fact that I made reference to the Anambra State government's intervention in protecting widows and ensuring that they are no longer maltreated. Yes, I didn't give the full details. I'm sorry about that. But what he also suggested is useful. Surely there is a director of lands from Anambra State here who might be in a position to give us first-hand information. I am not from Anambra State. I can only tell you what I've read or what I've known about through discussions with other people. But if there's a director of lands from Anambra State who would like to share with us, that might be very, very useful. But what I can say is that it is well known that there are some very negative treatments of widows. And it's not limited to Anambra State. It happens in other places. It's just that the Anambra State government has taken the bull by the horns and done something about it. And I think that is very, very commendable, because not all governments are sensitive to the needs of citizens. So I really appreciate what that government did and what difference it has brought to the way people perceive widows and how they ought to be treated. Because some of those practices are seriously demeaning and unfair to the women concerned. In short, apart from the traditions of, okay, she must not go out for so long, they must shave her hair, she must not do this, she cannot eat that, and so on and so forth. There are communities where they will even insist, not Anambra this time, they may even insist that the woman should drink the water from bathing her husband and things like that. Those things are horrible. They should never happen at all. Widows, they are women, they're already hurting from the fact that they lost a loved one. They are hurting from the fact that they know that their economic and whatever support is being taken away. Now you take them through some harrowing, terrible ritual experiences. It's worse than bad. It shows complete insensitivity to the plight of the widow. So I salute the government that took the bull by the horns to do something about that, and to also insist that where a woman's husband dies, whatever property is left behind, a proportion should be kept for the care of his widow and children. It's critical to their welfare. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, my good friend. What's the name? Okay, thank you. You're from which state? Oh, you're welcome to Abuja. Thank you for your question. To every rule, there's an exemption. When government is planning for mitigating the effect of climate change, there are certain activities that can be managed, and the people can still stay in that particular community. But there are some that can be so devastating. It can lead to loss of lives and property. And as such, government has a duty to advise the people to relocate from such community. What do you say about high flooding? And if you say that this place is prone to high flooding, then the people relocate. Or you want flooding to destroy them? No, they have to relocate. And there are certain climate change-induced disasters that can be managed. I hope that has answered your question. However, it depends on you. You know, there are some people that ask for that way out, but it's advisable when government gives a signal that this particular community is prone to a major disaster, it's better for them to leave. Back to my brother who asked question, Bayesa. Not that compensation induced climate change, but what we are saying is that climate change is land-based. And because it's land-based, activity takes place on land. When government is planning to mitigate climate change, government may say certain decision to acquire certain property, to build certain infrastructure, and acquisition coming. I don't know if you understand. The one that has the direct relationship is the land itself. But government, for them to do what they need to do, must acquire land. And when they acquire land, compensation follows. I don't know if I've answered your question. Thank you very much. I want to share my thought on gender balancing. Much has been said by our women, and I give it to them. They give back to us. We love them. We appreciate them. I believe that one of the ways for us to come out of this gender biasness is for the women themselves to believe that they are able and capable without extra help. When they say, is the first woman this thing to score Olympics? Why that? The first woman to cook 22 hours, the first woman to drive from Lagos to Abuja. Say, why that christening? Why that? You are making them as if they are not up to the standard. Our women are capable and able. Look at Alakija, look at the Chancellor in Germany, look at a lot of women making exploit. And I agree with Professor Nuhu, but with reservation on the way for us to allocate certain land for women. As of today, there are women looking at me, you have land. You have land, and most of my clients are women. They have property, and I manage property for them. But the angle Professor Nuhu and Mommy is coming out from are the cultural bottlenecks, and by extension, religion. And religion is a sensitive matter. That's why I'm always skeptical, you know. But everybody has his own religion. Perhaps Professor Nuhu, who is a Shetima, he holds a royal title, can also help us. How do we go down to those religion and cultural bottleneck that has caged our women? They should liberate our women. You see, when you talk about religion, laws, even it got to a time, Jesus Christ said, I came as a lamb. He said, I'm coming back as a lion. You see, the law, I don't know how to say, but we plead to our religion. There's also, as we are reviewing our crockery, we should review part of our religious law and liberate our women. You know, when the father dies, say, no, as a woman, and we will not give you land. Why? Give her part of the land. Let her also have an inheritance so that she can also have something to leave for our generation yet to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the questions and comments that we have received. I want to sincerely thank Professor Munhu for that remark. We hope to work together, as you said, and we'll definitely do something for systematic land titling. The gentleman that asked the question, unfortunately, you didn't give me your name, so I will just use the man that asked the question. If you look at the presentation I made, maybe one of the slides that talk about the review of systematic land titling, it talks about harmonizing the existing titles and the one that we're going to capture in the field. It's there in the presentation. However, since you've asked, I will definitely tell you. In systematic titling, we don't define boundaries. We don't define boundaries. We define boundaries based on what the owner said. The boundaries are defined based on what the owner said. If you said this is the boundary of your plot, that is what the systematic land titling workers will capture. But they will not capture in the absence of your neighbors. There must be the man who is on the left-hand side is there, the man who is in front, the man who is on the right side, and the man who is at the back. And they will all agree, the four of you will agree that that is the boundary of your property. Then these people will capture. Now, if you have a title before, then we will capture that title, but we will allow these people to look at that title we have captured. Do they agree with what you have presented? That is one. On the issue of if the case is in court, or if you have a case over it, the systematic title will not capture that. Even if we capture it, it will go to what they call public claim or adjudication. People will look at, there are people who will look at it. But they will be very careful in taking a final decision on it because it's still in court. It is when the court finally comes out with their judgment and say, oh no, the estate, or this is the rightful owner of that plot. It is at that point, the SCL people will now go back to the field and capture it correctly. I don't know whether I've answered your question. So that is the position of SLTR. They don't define boundaries. They don't claim properties that is still in court and give you the boundary. No. And it must be in the presence of people. If you are not there, one of your relations must be there. One of your relations must be there. I give you an example of what happened in Ondo State when the PTCR were doing the pilot in Ondo State. There was an elderly woman who has a piece of land. That woman should be around 80. But she could not go to define the boundary of her property. Fortunately for the people on the field, her grandchildren were with her. She now asked one of the grandchild to follow these people to define the boundary for them. And that was what happened. At the end of the day, at the age of 85 or 86, she was so happy when the boundary was defined and gave her the paper. What do you expect at that age when she will do with it? She might not do anything, but she was so happy that her title, the boundary of her property, is defined. And she has a title over it. Even if she dies that day, the children will know that yes, that is the boundary of the landed property our grandmother left for us. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for all our resource persons. Professor Kemiki, we appreciate you. Professor Modupe and Dr. Bishaka, we all appreciate you and thank you for what you have put together for us this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time for tea break, 30 minutes tea break. Take our tea break and resume immediately for the remaining presentation. Thank you.